Admiral Catherine Price stood alone on the observation deck of the carrier Defiance, watching the stars drift past the reinforced windows. She had spent 40 years serving in the human space navy, and in all that time, she had never felt so tired. Not physically tired, but tired in her soul. Tired of smiling at creatures who saw her species as clever animals. Tired of bowing to councils that treated humanity like disobedient children. Tired of watching her people die while politicians told her to be patient. The door behind her slid open, and Commander Daniel Hughes stepped onto the deck. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes, the sort of officer who inspired loyalty without demanding it. He had served under Catherine for 15 years, and he knew her moods better than anyone. "The transmission from Nesser Prime has finished decoding," he said quietly. "You should see it." Catherine did not turn around. "Tell me." Daniel hesitated. In all their years together, he had never struggled to deliver a report. But this was different. "They want us to surrender our colonies in the Orion Arm. All 17 worlds. They want us to dismantle every military vessel in our fleet. They want human ships banned from traveling beyond the Sol system without council escort." He paused. "They're calling it a peace proposal." Catherine finally turned. Her face showed no surprise, no anger, no fear, just the quiet exhaustion of someone who had been expecting bad news for a very long time. "What about Haven's Rest?" she asked. "They don't mention it. Of course they didn't." 3 weeks ago, a council fleet had arrived at the colony world of Haven's Rest and burned it from orbit. 14,000 human civilians had died in a single afternoon. Farmers and teachers and children all turned to ash because the Thessaly High Command wanted to send a message. The council had called it a necessary correction of human expansion. They had said humanity needed to learn its place. Catherine walked to the display terminal and pulled up the full text of the ultimatum. She read it slowly, carefully, making sure she understood every word. The language was formal and precise, the sort of legal terminology that diplomats use to make cruelty sound reasonable. "Surrender your freedom, and we will allow you to live. Resist, and we will destroy you." "Have they given us a deadline?" she asked. 10 standard days to respond. Catherine nodded slowly. She thought about her grandfather, who had served on Earth's first diplomatic mission to the Galactic Council 3 centuries ago. He had told her stories about standing in alien chambers, while creatures with too many eyes and too few hearts debated whether humans qualified as intelligent life. They had decided yes, but only barely. For 300 years, humanity had tried to prove itself worthy of that narrow vote. "Get me a secure channel to Secretary General Morrison," Catherine said. "Priority 1. Daniel moved to the communications panel and began entering codes. Within minutes, the holographic display flickered to life, showing the weathered face of Elizabeth Morrison. She was an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, the leader of humanity's civilian government. Behind her, Catherine could see the curved walls of the assembly chamber on Earth. "Admiral Price," Elizabeth said, "I assume you've received the Council's terms?" "Yes, ma'am." "And your assessment?" Catherine took a moment to gather her thoughts. She had given many assessments in her career, most of them measured and careful, designed to present options rather than opinions. But something had changed in her over the past 3 weeks. Something had broken, or perhaps something had finally been set free. "Ma'am, I've served humanity my entire adult life. I've watched us accept insult after insult, restriction after restriction, humiliation after humiliation. I've watched us smile at species who despise us, agree to treaties that rob us of dignity, and pretend that cooperation will eventually earn us respect." She paused. "It won't. It never has. And it never will." Elizabeth's expression remained neutral. "What do you recommend?" "I recommend that we don't respond." "You mean we should reject their terms?" "No, ma'am. I mean, we shouldn't respond at all. No counterproposal. No diplomatic notes. No negotiation. Nothing." Catherine felt the words flowing now, ideas she had kept buried for decades finally finding voice. They burned Haven's Rest because they knew we would complain and negotiate and eventually accept some compromise that left them in control. That's how they've always handled us. They push, we bend, they push again. And if we simply stop bending, then they'll have to decide whether to destroy us or leave us alone. No middle ground. No face-saving compromises. Just a simple choice. Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment. Behind her, Catherine could see aides moving nervously, whispering to each other. Finally, the Secretary General spoke again. Admiral, you're proposing that we gamble the survival of our entire species on the hope that the Council will blink first. No, ma'am. I'm proposing that we stop gambling and start fighting. Not with weapons, not yet, but with silence, with the one thing they've never seen from us. Catherine stepped closer to the display. For 300 years, we've talked. We've explained and argued and begged and compromised. And where's it gotten us? They still see us as animals. They still burn our colonies when we displease them. They still assume we'll accept whatever terms they offer because we're too weak to refuse. And if they decide to simply wipe us out, Catherine smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then at least we'll die on our feet instead of our knees. But I don't think they will. The Council isn't a unified empire. It's an alliance of species who hate each other almost as much as they hate us. The only thing holding them together is the assumption that no one would be crazy enough to challenge them. She paused. Let's make them wonder if that assumption is wrong. Elizabeth stared at her for a long moment. Catherine could see the calculation happening behind those sharp eyes, the weighing of risks and benefits that came naturally to any political leader. I'll take your recommendation to the Assembly, Elizabeth said finally. No promises. The channel closed, and Catherine turned back to the observation windows. The stars looked different now, somehow. Brighter, more hopeful. Or perhaps that was just her imagination. Daniel stepped up beside her. Do you really think this will work? Honestly, I have no idea. Catherine watched a distant nebula drift past, its colors shifting like a slow-motion explosion. But I know that what we've been doing hasn't worked. 300 years of cooperation, and they still burned Haven's Rest without a second thought. 300 years of patience, and they still think they can order us to surrender our children's future. So we stop talking. We stop talking, Catherine agreed. We stop explaining ourselves. We stop asking for permission to exist. She turned to face her old friend, and for the first time in years, she felt something like hope stirring in her chest. Let them wonder what we're thinking. Let them worry about what we're planning. For once in 3 centuries, let them be the ones waiting for an answer that never comes. Daniel nodded slowly. He didn't smile, but there was something new in his eyes. Something that looked almost like pride. I'll inform the crew, he said. Catherine turned back to the stars. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was waiting for humanity to respond to their ultimatum. They would wait a very long time. High Counselor Vareth of the Thessari had ruled his people for 200 standard years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched species discover faster-than-light travel and join the galactic community, hopeful and eager and so painfully naive. He had learned over those long centuries that every problem had a solution, every conflict had a resolution, and every species could be brought to heel with the right combination of pressure and reward. But now, standing in the great communication chamber of this Prime, he faced something he had never encountered before. The humans had stopped talking. 23 standard days, said his chief aide, a young Vasari named Korith. No response to our ultimatum, no diplomatic communications of any kind. Our ambassadors on Earth report that the human government refuses to acknowledge their presence. Vareth stared at the empty display screen that should have shown human faces, human expressions, human fear. Instead, there was nothing, just static and silence. This is unprecedented, said Counselor Mira of the Vendari. Her crystalline body shimmered with anxiety, casting rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. No species has ever simply ignored a council ultimatum. There must be an explanation. There is an explanation, Vareth said slowly. They're doing it on purpose. But why? They must know that silence will not protect them. We have the power to destroy every human world, to erase their species from existence. Surely they understand this. Vareth understood why Mira was confused. The Vendari were traders and bankers, masters of negotiation and compromise. To them, every interaction was a transaction, every conflict an opportunity for profit. They could not imagine a species choosing extinction over negotiation, but Vareth had studied human history more carefully than most. He knew about their wars, their rebellions, their strange willingness to die for abstract concepts like honor and freedom. He knew that humans were capable of making choices that seemed irrational to other species, choices driven by emotion rather than calculation. "Send a probe to the Sol system," he ordered. Red. Full surveillance package. I want to know what they're doing. The probe launched within hours, racing across the vast darkness of space toward the human homeworld. It carried the most advanced sensors that Thesari possessed, capable of detecting ship movements, communication signals, and energy signatures from millions of kilometers away. What it found was disturbing. "Their shipyards are operating at maximum capacity," Korath reported, his multiple eyes scanning the data feeds. "Military vessels are being constructed at rates we've never seen before. Civilian traffic is almost completely stopped. Their entire population seems to be focused on a single purpose." "War preparations," Vareth said. "That would be suicide. Our fleet outnumbers theirs 30 to 1. Our technology is generations ahead of theirs. They cannot possibly hope to defeat us in open combat, and yet they're preparing anyway." Vareth walked slowly around the display, studying the images of human ships under construction. They were not elegant vessels like the Cesari built. They were ugly, brutal things, designed for one purpose only: destruction. "There's something else," Korath said hesitantly. "Our intelligence networks have detected unusual signals from several locations in human space, energy signatures that don't match any known human technology." "What kind of signatures?" "We're not certain. They appear to be coming from deep space locations, asteroid fields, and gas giant moons, places where there shouldn't be any human activity at all." Vareth felt a cold sensation spreading through his body. For the first time in 2 centuries, he experienced something like fear. The humans had been hiding something. All those years of compliance and cooperation, all those smiles and agreements and careful negotiations, and they had been building something in secret, preparing for a day when they would no longer need to pretend. "Call an emergency session of the full council," Vareth ordered. "Every species, every representative. This situation has become more serious than we anticipated." The council chamber on Thisar Prime was the largest artificial structure in the galaxy, a vast dome capable of holding representatives from every known intelligent species. When the emergency session convened, it was filled with creatures of every shape and size, all watching Vareth with expressions that ranged from curiosity to concern. "Fellow counselors," Vareth began, "we face an unprecedented situation. The human species has chosen to ignore our ultimatum. They are preparing for war despite knowing they cannot win, and our intelligence suggests they have been hiding military capabilities that we were never aware of." Counselor Tesh of the Bromari Collective rose from his position. He was a large creature, covered in thick scales, with a voice like grinding stones. "Then we should simply attack now, before they complete their preparations. Strike quickly, destroy their fleet, force their surrender." "That may not be as simple as you imagine," Vareth replied. "Consider what we know about human behavior. They have spent 3 centuries pretending to be weak and cooperative. They have allowed us to believe they were harmless. Now, suddenly, they reveal hidden weapons and prepare for a war they cannot win." He paused, letting his words sink in. "What if that is exactly what they want us to see?" The chamber erupted in confused murmuring. Mira rose, her crystalline form catching the light. "What do you mean?" "I mean that humans are clever creatures. Deceptive creatures. They have been planning this moment for generations. Do we really believe that everything we're seeing now is their entire plan? Or is it possible that they want us to attack, that they have prepared something we haven't detected?" "You're giving them too much credit," Tesh growled. "They're primitives. Children compared to us. Children who survived the extinction of their homeworld's dominant species. Children who developed nuclear weapons within a century of discovering electricity. Children who reach their moon using technology barely more advanced than fire. Arath's voice grew cold. We have been underestimating them since the day we met them. Perhaps it is time to stop. The debate continued for hours. Some counselors demanded immediate attack. Others urged caution. But throughout it all, one fact remained unchanged. The humans were not responding to any communication. They had built a wall of silence around their entire civilization, and no one knew what was happening behind it. Finally, Vareth called for a vote. The council would send a full diplomatic delegation to human space, carrying offers of renewed negotiation and implied threats of destruction. They would demand an audience with human leaders and refuse to leave until they received one. And if the humans still refused to speak? Mira asked. Vareth had no answer. In all his centuries of experience, he had never faced an enemy who simply refused to engage. Every species he had ever dealt with wanted something, feared something, could be bargained with, or threatened into compliance. The humans, it seemed, had moved beyond wanting and fearing. They had moved beyond bargaining. They had simply stopped playing the game altogether. And that, more than any weapon or fleet, was what frightened Vareth most of all. Ambassador Nathan Cole had spent his entire career talking. It was what diplomats did. They talked and listened and negotiated and compromised, always searching for the words that would build bridges between different worlds. He had once believed that any problem could be solved through communication. That understanding was always possible if both sides were willing to try. That belief had died on Haven's Rest, along with 14,000 of his fellow humans. Now Nathan stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Quiet Dawn, watching the council delegation approach on his sensors, 12 warships, each one large enough to swallow his own vessel whole. They carried enough firepower to destroy a planet, and they were coming to demand that humanity surrender. They're requesting permission to dock, said Lieutenant Commander Sandra Bell, his chief aide. She was a young woman with dark hair and steady hands, someone Nathan had worked with for 5 years. He trusted her completely. I know, Nathan said. Should I respond? No. Sandra paused, then nodded slowly. She had received the same briefing as Nathan. She understood what they were doing, even if she didn't entirely agree with it. The council flagship transmitted again, more insistent this time. The voice of the Thassary ambassador filled the bridge, translated into perfect English by automatic systems. Human vessel Quiet Dawn. This is Ambassador Varath of the Galactic Council. We have come to discuss terms of peace between our peoples. Please respond and indicate your willingness to receive our delegation. Nathan sipped his coffee and said nothing. Hours passed. The council ships remained in position, occasionally transmitting new requests, demands, and eventually pleas for acknowledgement. Nathan ignored them all. He read reports, reviewed crew assignments, and discussed minor administrative matters with Sandra. It was a perfectly ordinary day, except for the 12 warships hovering just outside his windows. They're getting agitated, Sandra observed, checking her sensors. The flagship has moved closer. I'm detecting increased power to their weapons systems. They won't fire, Nathan said calmly. How can you be sure? Because they came here to talk, not to fight. If they wanted us dead, they would have attacked without warning. The fact that they sent diplomats means they want something from us. Something they can't get with weapons. What could they possibly want from us? They hold all the power, Nathan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They want us to cooperate. They want us to accept their terms and pretend that everything is normal. They want us to go back to being good, obedient members of their council, following their rules and accepting their judgment. He set down his coffee cup, but mostly they want us to validate their power, to acknowledge that they have the right to burn our colonies and demand our submission. We're not going to give them that. No, we're not going to give them anything. The Thessaly ambassador transmitted again, his voice carrying a new edge of frustration. Ambassador Cole, your silence is unprecedented and unacceptable. The Galactic Council demands an immediate response. Failure to comply will be interpreted as an act of hostility. Nathan walked to the observation window and stared out at the council fleet. They were beautiful ships, he had to admit, sleek and powerful and covered in the flowing script that marked them as vessels of the galactic government. For 3 centuries, those ships had represented authority and civilization. Humanity had looked at them with awe and fear and desperate hope. Now, Nathan looked at them and felt only contempt. "Sandra," he said quietly, "what do you know about the history of the Galactic Council? They've been the dominant power in this region of the galaxy for about 12,000 years. Founded by the Thessari, later joined by the Vendari, the Bromari, and about a dozen other species. They maintain peace through economic control and military superiority. And how do they handle conflict? Negotiation, mostly. When that fails, they apply pressure through trade sanctions and diplomatic isolation. Military force is only used as a last resort, and usually only against species that have clearly violated council law."
Exactly.
Nathan turned away from the window. "They're negotiators, bureaucrats, politicians. Their entire system is built on the assumption that everyone will play by the same rules, that every species will respond to pressure with counter-pressure, that every conflict will end with compromise. And we're not playing by those rules anymore. No, we're not playing at all." Sandra was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "What happens when they realize that?" "I don't know." That's the honest answer. "But I know what happens if we keep playing their game. More colonies burned. More restrictions. More humiliation. Eventually, we lose everything that makes us human, and we become just another servant species, grateful for whatever scraps they throw us." The hours stretched into days. The council delegation remained in position, transmitting increasingly desperate messages. They offered new negotiations. They promised better terms. They hinted at consequences and suggested alternatives. Nathan ignored everything. Finally, on the 6th day, the council ships began to move. Slowly, reluctantly, they turned and headed back toward the Sari space. The ambassador's final transmission carried something Nathan had never heard in an alien voice before: uncertainty. "Human vessel Quiet Dawn, we are withdrawing to consult with the full council. Be advised that your continued silence is creating a crisis situation. We strongly urge you to reconsider your position before circumstances force us to take actions that cannot be reversed." Nathan watched them go. When the last ship had vanished into the darkness of faster-than-light travel, he finally allowed himself to relax. His hands were shaking, he realized. The stress of the past week had been greater than he wanted to admit. Sandra appeared at his side. "What now?" "Now we go home and report. Phase 1 is complete. They know we're not talking. They know we're not afraid." Nathan took a deep breath, and they know that something has changed. Something they don't understand and can't control. "Do you think they'll attack? Eventually, when they realize that silence is not a temporary tactic, but a permanent policy? When they understand that we would rather die than submit?" Nathan smiled grimly. "But by then, we'll be ready for them." He turned back to the observation window, watching the stars that had witnessed humanity's first step toward true independence. The silence felt good. It felt like freedom. For 300 years, humanity had talked until their voices were hoarse and their pride was broken. Now they had discovered a new kind of power. The power to say nothing at all, deep beneath the surface of Mars. Chief Engineer Robert Kim stood in a control room that officially did not exist. The walls were lined with displays showing systems that had been hidden for generations, built in secret by men and women who knew that someday humanity would need weapons the Council had never seen. That day had finally arrived. "Reactor 17 is online," reported his assistant, a young woman named Grace Patterson. She had joined his team only 3 years ago, but she had proven herself brilliant and dedicated. More importantly, she could keep secrets. That completes the primary defense grid. 48 orbital platforms, all fully operational. Robert studied the tactical display. Each platform was a marvel of hidden engineering, disguised as mining equipment or research stations, but capable of targeting enemy vessels at ranges the SL thought impossible. It had taken 3 generations to build them, working in shifts that never appeared on any official record. using materials diverted from legitimate projects through 1,000 small deceptions. Any response from the Council? He asked. Their surveillance probes are still monitoring Earth and the inner colonies, but they haven't detected anything unusual. As far as they know, we're just building civilian ships. Good to keep it that way until Admiral Price gives the order. Grace nodded, then hesitated. Sir, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did we hide all this? Why spend generations building weapons in secret instead of standing up to the Council openly? Robert was quiet for a moment. He thought about his daughter, who had been a teacher on Haven's Rest. She had been 23 years old when the Council burned her colony from orbit. He had received the news while standing in this very room, surrounded by the weapons that might have saved her if only they had been ready in time. Because we weren't strong enough, he said finally. Not yet. The first generation built the foundations. The second generation expanded them. We're the third generation, the ones who get to finish what our grandparents started. He turned to face Grace. They knew this day would come. They knew that eventually the Council would push too far, and we would need the tools to push back. They sacrificed their whole lives building those tools in secret, never knowing if they would live to see them used. Now we get to use them. Now we get to use them. Or die trying. Meanwhile, on Earth, Secretary General Elizabeth Morrison addressed an emergency session of the Human Assembly. The chamber was filled with representatives from every human world, their faces showing a mixture of fear and determination that had become familiar over the past weeks. The Council has withdrawn their diplomatic delegation, Elizabeth announced. They are currently debating their response. Our intelligence suggests that several factions are pushing for immediate military action, while others favor continued negotiation. Representative George Adams of Mars rose from his seat. And what are we doing while they debate? We are preparing. Elizabeth activated the holographic display, showing a map of human space. Red dots marked military installations, blue dots marked civilian population centers, and green dots marked something else entirely. Something that made several representatives gasp in surprise. What are those? Someone asked. Weapons platforms, shipyards, supply caches, built over 3 generations by patriots who understood that our survival might someday depend on capabilities the Council didn't know we possessed. Elizabeth's voice was steady and calm. The Council believes they know the extent of our military power. They are wrong. The chamber erupted in questions and exclamations. Elizabeth waited for the noise to die down before continuing. Let me be clear about our strategy. We are not preparing to win a conventional war against the Council. Their forces still outnumber ours significantly, and their technology remains superior in many areas. What we are preparing to do is make any attack on humanity so costly, so painful, and so public that the Council will hesitate to proceed. George asked. By consolidating our population. By moving every civilian we can to the core systems around Earth. By making it impossible for the Council to strike our military without. Killing millions of innocents in the process. Elizabeth paused. And by preparing weapons that will hurt them far worse than they expect. The representatives were silent for a long moment. Then someone in the back of the chamber asked the question that everyone was thinking. What if they attack anyway? What if they decide that genocide is acceptable? Elizabeth's face showed no expression. Then we die. But we don't die quietly. We don't die begging for mercy. And we don't die alone. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes with representatives from every corner of human space. If the Council decides to destroy us, they will pay such a price that every other species in the galaxy will think twice before crossing them again. We may not survive, but our defiance will echo through history. Future civilizations will remember that humanity chose death over submission. For the first time in 3 centuries, every human world stood united in a single purpose. No more compromise. No more negotiation. No more cooperation with species that saw them as animals to be managed and controlled. Across human space, the preparations accelerated. Families said goodbye to loved ones. Soldiers kissed their children and reported to their ships. Civilians packed their belongings and boarded transports heading toward Earth. The Great Migration had begun, Admiral Catherine Price watched the data streams from her position on the Defiance. Thousands of ships were moving through human space, carrying millions of people toward the relative safety of the core systems. It was the largest population movement in human history, and it was happening in almost complete silence. "The Council probes are watching everything," Commander Daniel Hughes reported. "They can see the migration happening," Good Catherine said. "Let them see. Let them understand what they've forced us to become. And when they attack." Catherine studied the tactical display, watching the slow dance of ships and stations and hidden weapons. The plan was simple in concept, but terrible in execution. When the Council came, they would find not a scattered collection of colonies to burn one by one, but a single concentrated target surrounded by every weapon humanity could muster. "When they attack," she said quietly, "we show them what humans are really capable of. Not the smiling diplomats they've known for 3 centuries. Not the obedient servants who accepted every humiliation without complaint. The real us. The ones who fought world wars and survived ice ages and crawled out of the ocean just to reach for the stars." Daniel nodded slowly. "The ones who don't know how to surrender. The ones who never learned." Catherine turned away from the display. "Get some rest while you can. The storm is coming, and when it arrives, none of us will sleep for a very long time." Outside the ship, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the drama unfolding among the tiny creatures who had dared to claim. A few small worlds in one corner of an endless galaxy. But somewhere in the darkness, ships were moving. Weapons were charging, and humanity was waiting, silent and ready, for whatever came next. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Representatives from every major species sat in their designated positions, watching High Counselor Veroth with expressions that ranged from confusion to barely hidden terror. For 12,000 years, this chamber had been the center of civilized power in the galaxy. Now it felt like a tomb. "The humans have completed their migration," Veroth announced, his voice carrying across the vast space without any hint of the fear he felt inside. 93% of their population is now concentrated in the Sol system and 3 neighboring star systems. Their outer colonies have been abandoned. "Abandoned?" Counselor Mira asked. "Why would they abandon perfectly good worlds?" "Because they're not planning to need them anymore." Veroth activated the central display, showing the human core systems. Red markers indicated military installations, thousands of them clustered around Earth like a shell of death. "They've surrounded their remaining territory with every weapon they possess. Our probes have detected defensive platforms we never knew existed. Weapon systems that don't match any known human technology." "How is that possible?" demanded Counselor Tesh. "We've been monitoring their development for 3 centuries. We know exactly what they're capable of building. Apparently we don't." Veroth let that statement hang in the air for a moment. "Our intelligence analysts estimate that the humans have been secretly developing military technology for at least 3 generations. Everything they showed us, everything they allowed us to see, was a fraction of their true capability." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Counselors accused each other of failing to detect the deception. Military commanders demanded immediate attack. Diplomats called for renewed negotiation. Through it all, Veroth remained silent, watching the chaos with the weary patience of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Finally, he raised his hand for quiet. When the voices died down, he spoke again. "Let me explain what we are actually facing. The humans have positioned their entire civilization as a single target. If we attack, we cannot strike their military without killing millions of civilians. Every ship we destroy, every station we burn, will be broadcast across the galaxy as evidence of Council brutality." "We have destroyed civilizations before," Tesh growled. "The galaxy will understand that we had no choice. Will they?" Veroth turned to face the Bromari counselor. "The Vendari merchant guilds are already questioning whether trade sanctions against humanity are worth the economic disruption. The Bromari themselves are facing unrest among their subject species, who see in humanity a reflection of their own desires for independence. Even our own people are beginning to ask whether burning colonists was truly necessary. You're saying we've already lost, Mira said softly. I'm saying we've created a situation with no good outcomes. If we attack, we become monsters in the eyes of half the galaxy. If we back down, we show weakness that other species will exploit. And if we simply wait, the humans grow stronger every day, while our alliance grows weaker. The silence that followed was heavier than anything Vareth had ever experienced. For 12,000 years, the Council had maintained peace through the simple assumption that no one would be foolish enough to challenge it. That assumption had been the foundation of everything. The invisible force that held dozens of species in line. The humans had shattered that assumption with nothing more than silence. There may be another option, said a voice from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned to see Ambassador Korath, Vareth's young aide, stepping forward with an expression of nervous determination. We could simply leave them alone. Explain, Vareth said. The humans aren't attacking us. They're not threatening our territory or our trade routes. All they want is to be left in peace, to govern themselves without our interference. Korath swallowed hard, clearly aware that he was contradicting centuries of council policy. Perhaps we should give them what they want and appear weak, Tesh demanded. Weak to whom? The humans don't want to conquer us. They just want us to stop trying to control them. If we withdraw our demands, acknowledge their right to self-governance, and establish normal diplomatic relations, we lose nothing except the illusion that we can dictate terms to every species in the galaxy. An illusion that has kept peace for 12 millennia. Has it? Korath gestured at the display showing human space, still silent, still waiting. Or has it simply delayed the inevitable? How many other species have accepted our rules only because they lacked the courage or the capability to refuse? How many of them are watching right now, wondering if they might be next to stand up? Vareth studied his aide for a long moment. The young Nessari had put into words something that had been forming in Varath's mind for weeks. The Council's power had always rested on two foundations: overwhelming military force and the assumption that resistance was futile. The humans had found a way to undermine both. Contact the human government, Vareth said finally. Offer a complete withdrawal of our ultimatum in exchange for formal peace negotiations. They won't answer, Myra pointed out. They haven't answered anything for months, and keep offering. Every day, every hour if necessary. Show them that we're serious about finding a new relationship. Show them that we understand things have changed. And if they still refuse to speak, Vareth turned back to the display, studying the silent fortress that humanity had built around itself. He thought about all the assumptions he had made over his long life, all the certainties that had proven false. He thought about what it meant to face an enemy who had moved beyond fear and beyond negotiation. Oh. Then we wait, he said. We wait and we hope that someday they'll decide we're worth talking to again. Because the alternative is a war that will cost us far more than we can afford to lose, far across the galaxy. Admiral Catherine Price stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the same stars that Vareth was watching. She had received reports of the Council's debates, had seen the signs of growing division and uncertainty among their ranks. They're offering to negotiate, Commander Daniel Hughes reported. Full withdrawal of the ultimatum. Recognition of human sovereignty. Everything we could have wanted 300 years ago. Catherine nodded slowly. I know. Are we going to respond? She considered the question carefully. Part of her wanted to answer. To accept the Council's surrender and begin building a new relationship based on mutual respect rather than submission. But another part of her, the part that remembered Haven's rest and 3 centuries of humiliation, wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet, she said finally. Let them wait a little longer. Let them feel what we felt all those years, standing outside their chambers, hoping for a response that never came. Daniel smiled grimly. Revenge? Justice. Or maybe just a lesson. Catherine turned away from the display. They pushed us too far, and now they have to live with the consequences. Maybe in a few months or a few years, we'll be ready to talk again. But for now, we stay silent. And if they attack, then we show them exactly what humanity is capable of. But I don't think they will. Catherine walked to the observation window and stared out at the stars that had witnessed humanity's transformation from humble newcomers to defiant survivors. They finally understand something that should have been obvious from the beginning. You can push anyone far enough that they stop caring about consequences. You can take so much that the victim has nothing left to lose. She placed her hand on the cold glass, feeling the vibration of the ship's engines beneath her fingers. The Galactic Council spent 300 years treating us like animals, she said softly. They burned our colonies and demanded our submission and assumed we would always comply. They pushed and pushed and pushed until there was nowhere left for us to go. And now? Catherine smiled, and for the first time in months, there was something like peace in her eyes. Now it's their turn to be afraid. Their turn to wonder what happens next. Their turn to wait in silence for an answer that may never come. She turned back to face her old friend, the officer who had stood beside her through decades of service and sacrifice. They wanted us to learn our place, Daniel. Instead, they taught us something far more valuable. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Outside the ship, the stars continued their eternal dance. The galaxy went on with its business, civilizations rising and falling as they always had. But something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted in the balance of power that had governed the cosmos for thousands of years. Humanity had found its voice. And paradoxically, it was the voice of silence.